All right, let's. Hello, my name is Harvey Rosenthal, and I'm the CEO of the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services, or NIAPRS. NIAPRS is a 40-year-old partnership of people in recovery, people who provide services, and people in recovery who provide services. And I'm delighted to be here on behalf of NIAPRS. NIAPRS has a long-time relationship with the Academy of Peer Services. As a matter of fact, in the very beginning, we brought Rutgers to New York, and we've been a great partnership ever since. And so I'm particularly proud of Mariam Hussain-Medin, who's our staff person with you now. So this is about networking and leadership development, and ultimately to build community power. So why is advocacy, a lot of focus on advocacy, why is it essential? Because were we not out there, who would be out there fighting for human rights and choice protections? Who would be fighting discrimination? And for example, you see this in the New York City tabloids, these false connections with violence and calls for forced treatment. Who would be fighting for community inclusion and immersion to advance housing, employment, transportation, and hunger? Who would be fighting to make sure that everyone got access to health care, particularly in Medicaid, and that people knew how to grieve, push their grievances and appeals, and make sure that peer support was part of the menu, including self-directed care and a recovery focus and wellness. But carrying our message to the public, this presentation really looks at the touch points for which we network and organize. We might be fighting on the state budget or fighting for peer services. We might be fighting on legislation to make sure services are voluntary and not forced. We may be fighting on the area of regulation, where crisis stabilization centers is an option to offer a peer-led one that's not medical, that's recovery oriented. And we're always interested in working to reach the public and educate the public. Really important, nothing about us without us. We are the human rights movement. We go back to the early movements. All of our community building as advocacy is in their tradition. We carry the torch on. And this is the folks we're carrying the torch on. Our movement really began watching the civil rights movement, African Americans in the middle, people with physical disabilities on the right, LGBTQI individuals on the top left, and women back in the day in Seneca Falls, New York. So we observed, we learned, and our movement really began in fighting for human rights. And this is Judy Chamberlain, one of our earliest fighters. She wrote a book you see on the right, Patient Control Alternatives to the System. This is something important to give because Jackie McKinney passed away a short time ago. So these are the mothers of the movement. And Jackie was somebody who really sort of led the way. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So we have to be out there. Otherwise, we're the ones that are, then other people decide what happens to us. Important is the picking the right issue. And the question becomes, how are priorities developed? How is it grassroots? How is it part of the network? How does it, again, sort of bring out leadership? Who gets to decide? And in picking a goal that's realistic and the most urgent, and it comes from the highest principle. And I show you this. If you've been to an NIAPRS conference, you've heard the term Francis Oliveira. Well, this is Francis. And years ago, he was the face of the campaign to make the half fare, so benefit in public transport available to people with psychiatric disabilities. And that occurred at an NIAPRS regional forum in Far Rockaway, where the groups really brought together and picked the issue forward. And we left with the idea to organize the campaign with Fountain House. So you're really going to create your networks, and it could be a broad base. And the broader you can make it, the better, because some of these groups, therefore, are not fighting with you, they're fighting alongside of you. So whether they're consumer survivor groups, family members, providers, disability and legal rights groups, very important, racial equity and justice coalitions, criminal justice reform advocates, general sort of community groups. We're really trying to, and if we can, get county, state, and federal officials with us. We're often advocating towards them, but sometimes they join our coalition. And certainly, wherever we can get the media to support us, we don't have a lot of money, so it's high-priced lobbyists, so we need to reach the media so directly. So again, the power of coalitions. We share leaders, we share contacts. constituencies. I know this person in the governor's office. I know this person in the legislature. Sharing information, not competing, working together. Same message discipline. And sometimes we lead each other. Sometimes this group has got the message, and other times, and we follow. NIAPRS followed the campaign for alternatives to isolated confinement all the way because they had the message. And other times, we've been the leader in the message. So it's really a real partnership. Then comes shaping the message and keeping it simple, making it visual, staying on message, making sure the personal impact is forward, but not personalizing it to the point it becomes only about you. And keeping your eyes on the prize and what I call discipline outrage, discipline above all, but from that outrage about fighting for justice and rights. So once you have your issue, you got to figure out your message. You got to find your voice. You got to pick your spokespeople. You want to keep the leaders always close to the grassroots. And you want to adapt the message for different audiences. So let's say you're going to meet with a legislator. You're going to have a clear message, state the issue. You need a spokesperson as you go in there. How the members in the meeting are going to sort of augment the message, but it's clear and organized. People aren't interrupting. We're taking notes during the meeting and we follow up after the meeting. This is a really important meeting. There's Felix Ortiz, was the Assembly Mental Health Committee chair. You see Carla Rabinowitz on the right, several other gentlemen I don't recall. And they were there talking about cannabis law. And Assemblyman Ortiz was very helpful at the end of the day, but they rehearsed this, they brought it forward, they left materials. You could see them on his table. Here's another one. One of our earliest events was we helped close 5 state hospitals and move the money into the community that grew peer support, created the funding. So there's the flyer for the rally some years ago. And an NIAPRS vice president at the time did a news conference with Senate leadership to move the bill forward. We're all about all strategies and all voices forward. Here we are, Teresa Hall here in front of the Capitol steps, and we're fighting for the workforce, you can see in the signs, housing, choice. And when we get everybody together, what a power, wearing the same hats. Albany turns yellow on NIAPRS Legislative Day. It's very powerful. We do call-in drives. Here's one on the HALT bill, trying to ban solitary confinement. We've done testimony, his partnership with MEHEP and NIAPRS, where we testified against the false connection with violence. Here's a news conference with Carla Rabinowitz again, with civil rights groups, disability rights groups, criminal justice reform groups, all fighting for a different approach to police, alternative to police response to crisis, in this case led by peers. Here's an important one. Pictures are a little faded, but this is Cross Disability. That's another network. It's really important, particularly now with the most integrated sending sort of council. This is on the left, we fought for the Medicaid buy-in. So here's 2 strategies. The one to the left is a march. The other one is civil disobedience. And you'll see myself and a couple of our advocates from the AIDS HIV group and the independent living group being arrested outside the governor's office. And together that worked. And now we have the Medicaid buy-in. One of the first things we did, and again, this is a chance where everybody got to give feedback. They wanted to know people's experience in state hospitals with seclusion and restraint. And because of this feedback and that report led to articles like that, and they dramatically lowered seclusion and restraint. Again, network across the lines and leadership and action. We've been opposed to involuntary treatment from the very beginning. Here's what, it's fuzzy. One of our marchers, that George Ebert under the sign, longtime leader. And we have successfully sort of bottled it up for 20 years. We're very proud of that, but that's persistence, strong messaging, doing advocacy at home, in the district, in the newspapers, in Albany, every strategy and everyone working together, staying on message. Perhaps the biggest campaign we had last year was working with our friends in the criminal justice community, former prisoners who were confined in solitary confinement. And we did, as you can see, marches and news conferences and rallies with our friends in that group. And we won after 8 years of incredible campaigning. As they led, we followed in that one. Extraordinary impact. We go beyond New York into Washington. We joined a group throughout the country who marched, but all those green hats are from NIAPRS. So we brought a lot of NIAPRS people there. Again, networking beyond the state, beyond our little circle and sphere. And voting is the most important thing in the end, to really be heard, because that's what legislators, will really hear, and governors, things like that. So here's the power of grassroots advocacy. Here's some examples you see of over the years, the work we've all done together. We've led, we've networked, we've partnered, and we've done so much for people. And I hope that this presentation is helpful to you, and you folks get out there and advocate. Thank you.